Weather Center. A breezy morning ahead. Showers followed by a chance at a heavy thunderstorm this afternoon. High near 78. Currently 70. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Money Hour radio show, Saturday afternoons at 3 on AM 560, The Answer. Brought to you by Pearshell Financial Group.
Listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Could the cure for social media platforms that amplify dreck and ignorance be social media platforms that amplify thoughtfulness and civility? Is there a big enough market for their survival?
It sounds lovely.
Sounds lovely.
People like hate and hateful messages and being mean and actually taking time out of their day to write mean emails or post mean messages on social media.
Well, I mean, Facebook. Well, right. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. These are, generally speaking, they are neutral communication channels. You can pipe through it whatever you want. You can pipe through sewage if you want, or you can pipe through something better than that. Now you have the issue of the curators and the minders and what they allow to be posted and don't allow. And so, of course, this has spurred a whole debate about whether or not there should be content regulation and they be treated as publishers. But before we even get there, is there a market cure, as it were? For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Alexandra Hudson. She's a research fellow for the American Institute for Economic Research, a contributor to another number of outlets, including the Journal, Quillette, The Hill, and the Washington Examiner. Alexandra, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about this piece you wrote that profiling new social media platforms that are attempting to raise the level of a discourse, such as consider civility.
Thank you. Yes. So it's kind of an undertold story that it's been my privilege to spread the word about a little bit. But that there is this sort of burgeoning sort of revolution, this countercultural trend of startups and organizations using technology to promote civil discourse. And I was actually able to sit in. So the nature of civility, this tech startup that just launched in the Bay Area just a few weeks ago, they have an app, and you can either start a conversation on the app, like you can ask a question that other people who are interested in that same topic. You can set a time to meet, and you'll meet at a coffee shop, and kind of just pursue intellectual inquiry for its own sake. Or you can instead of starting a conversation, you can join another conversation that kind of piques your interest, your curiosity. And so it is kind of a strange concept to think that there is this sort of unmet demand for intellectual conversation, so much so that people are meeting up with complete strangers at coffee shops in San Francisco to kind of have this sort of outlet for free thought and conversation.
So you get on the app, you get on the app, and then there's meetups where people just sit down and talk about issues of civility, or issues but being civil.
Issues. No, not. They don't talk about civility. They talk about ideas. Mm-hmm. And so, in the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, in Vienna and Paris and London, there was this vibrant cafe culture where people would come and talk about ideas. It was where luminaries and philosophers of the day would sit and people would converse and dialogue. And civility is trying to recapture that sort of cafe culture. And they actually have kind of a sensei who is a scholar of those eras of history who has advised them on how to use new media to facilitate these kind of eras of high learning.
Okay, but before we're all scamps living in a Parisian flat, La Boheme style, how do these new apps like Consider Civility, how do they to prevent those who would say, I want to have a discussion about Nietzsche's argument that God is dead, and somebody says, you're a totalitarian idiot or whatever, and have the conversation be sidetracked by those that are not interested in higher level discourse?
That's a great question. And so I think to some extent it's self-selective. Like, people are there because they want to have thoughtful disagreement and like rigorous conversation. As an example, the civility meetup that I sat in on was on natalism. Should government be promoting policies for people to have children? And there were some that were pro, some that were con, and most seemed incredibly open-minded about the topic. And I think that's the kind of person that civility attracts. It's not people who are entrenched in their ideological or policy views and are there, A, for just kind of the intellectual exercise and the outlet, and B, to actually learn something. And I think that's a really encouraging trend. And I profiled a series, like half a dozen other organizations that are facilitating similar conversations and similar occasions as well, because I think there is this unmet demand. We hear about social media and big tech being a pox in our public discourse, but, that it doesn't have to be this way, and it isn't always that way. And these are examples of that being the case.
You profile a couple of others. I just want you to describe a couple of others that maybe provide a different angle of incidence to the same destination, including Make America Dinner Again,
Yeah.
MATA.
MATA.
Exactly.
I see what they did there. And Better Angels as well. Any of those getting describe them first, and then describe whether or not they're getting any traction.
Yeah, so MATA, Make America Dinner Again, is basically trying to get people around a dinner table, people of different political views, to have conversations about policy and ideas. But the real element is to get people in the same room of different political persuasions, and to have them have face-to-face conversations about these important topics that are suited to in-person conversations and are not suited to, Twitter, blasting each other on Twitter. And Better Angels, I had the honor of being at one of the keynotes of the Better Angels convention that took place in St. Louis this past weekend. And there was it was a national convention. There were 300 Reds and Blues from across the country who are committed to recovering American civil discourse, and the whole purpose of Better Angels is similar to MATA, just to rehumanize politics by showing people that you can disagree without being disagreeable, and you can, the person that disagrees with you is a decent human being, and you have other things in common, and we're still Americans first. And yes, they're getting lots of traction, to answer your question. Yeah,
there is real interest here. You're seeing, they're seeing the needle move in terms of participation.
Absolutely, and like I said before, it is this great undertold story, because stories of hope don't sell as well as stories of vitriol and fury. So it's my honor and privilege and my mission to kind of shed light on these undertold stories and initiatives to let other people know that they exist, and that they're not alone.
Well, it's easy to be mean when you're hiding behind a computer screen, correct?
That's exactly
right.
it.
And that's why I make it a point to be mean in person too.
Exactly.
This
guy is real.
I'm consistent.
He doesn't mess
right.
around.
Yeah, thank
Alexandra.
Exactly. Just really quickly, I in the essay that I wrote for the American Institute for Economic Research on these new startups, I talk about there's a whole body of research on what's called computer-moderated communication, or computer-mediated conversation, CMC, and which people generally find to be inferior and not a perfect substitute for in-person conversation, which is kind of intuitive. But it also speaks to why these organizations are so important. We also have this loneliness epidemic going on, where it's perfectly possible for there are many people who kind of go to work and go home on weekends, and then the next time they see someone is at work on Monday morning. So to give people these outlets with the more opportunities to engage around common loves and common ideas and common themes, I think is beneficial on so many societal levels.
Well, it's sort of timely, this discussion, because of this recent survey we mentioned earlier in the show. More in Common, a group that surveyed Americans about their attitudes with respect to political correctness 8 months ago, and found remarkable agreement, or at least agreement, that there's something to be concerned about with respect to political correctness. They find, as reported in The Atlantic over the weekend, that Republicans don't understand Democrats, Democrats don't understand Republicans. Frankly, the higher up you go in terms of education and income, the more likely you are to vilify your political opponents, it turns out.
Interesting.
But they're real agreements. I mean, for example, 7 in 10 Democrats reject the idea of open borders. So, in terms of a discussion that you could have, I assume these sites that you're talking about, it doesn't have to just be sort of heady stuff about 17th century composers or philosophers. It can also be pedestrian conversations about our electoral politics, in real time. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's definitely true. Did they do the Hidden Tribes?
Yes,
report?
the Hidden Tribes, same group.
Yeah,
Yep.
I remember that. Exactly.
So so there's a huge mission field out there. I don't know if it'll be served by these startups, but to your point, we'll watch and see if they get traction. And I guess it would be an encouraging note for our republic if they do. She is Alexandra. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I agree.
Okay. She is Alexandra Hudson. She's a research fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, contributed to the Wall Street Journal, Quillette, which, by the way, is another outlet that I try to recommend intermittently on the show as well, because it's very consistent with this entire discussion we're having. Really